In today's video we have a National video recorder. I've already taken the top off, but that's the top cover. It's an NV870 hi-fi stereo. This was like their first slimline machine. Nice tight fitting cover. And these were a really good era of National videos. Before this I had the NV870, which was probably another inch or two thicker than this, and not the most reliable machine ever. This thing's basically the era of the NV, was it 250, 280, 450 and that sort of stuff. And these are really super reliable VCRs, very well built, probably some of the best ones ever built. Didn't see an awful lot of the hi-fi ones, but they did sell a lot of the 280s or 250s and the 450s. I think this is kind of more similar to the 450 because it's got the same sort of squarish front panel on it. And besides belt kits, there really wasn't a lot used to go a lot wrong with these. They did have a common issue of the brake band. And I'll give this one a quick run just to see what's actually wrong with it. It's got a picture issue. This was sent in by a viewer, Daniel, who's over in Western Australia. And he couldn't get anyone to look at it, so I said I'll have a go at it and see if we can get it going, since they are a good machine, these. Hopefully it doesn't have too much wrong with it, but it does have a little bit of an interesting fault. But they do have this brake band here. Goes around the supply reel, and the little felt used to fall off them. And all we used to do is get contact adhesive most of the time, and just, if it was still in reasonable condition, you just clean any muck off the felt and just glue it back into position onto the copper. That's all it ever really needed. You could buy replacement ones, but a lot of the time you just mark where the old one was, put the felt back on, and the back tension and everything would be exactly the same as it should have been. I have a quick look at this one, and it seems to have too much back tension, so possibly someone's undone the end of it and put it back in wrong, because the tape was slowing and getting wow in the sound. But the main issue with this one is we seem to have a missing picture issue. But interestingly, it looks a lot like bad heads in it. But interestingly, when you go into fast forward and the like, where the machine, I think it puts some sort of different sync pulses in or something, you can actually get the picture back. Only seems to be a black and white one though. I must get another tape and see, because I think that one may only have a black and white movie on it. So I'll try a different tape. But that can still be an issue with the heads. They have a signal in these things to synchronise the drum motor with everything else. I've had machines where people have pulled the magnets off the bottom and put them on the wrong way, and you get some weird issues and quite difficult to find. But I'd check this one. These don't actually have the normal like magnet plate underneath that you can just unscrew. This one's kind of got the motor up on the upper side, just under the actual main drum unit. It's not all on the back side, sort of underneath the mechanism. So it could be something to do with that. I mean, I don't know for sure. These heads almost look like they've been replaced at some stage. You never know if they've been put in the wrong way or something like that, because you've got this white side and green side. I think normally mechanically you can put them on 180 degrees out of whack. This did have some pretty horrible sounds. The guy said that originally the drum motor didn't start. He had to give it a spin, and it did make some pretty horrible sort of almost grinding sounds, clicking sounds and stuff when I first tried this. It seems to have come a bit better after I've run it a bit. So the bearings probably aren't the best in this. So I don't know if I've actually pulled one of these National ones apart. You can sometimes pull them apart and just lubricate the bearings in there. If you've got a machine that doesn't want to start up on its own, often it's after they've been sitting for a long time, they just won't fire on their own, but you give them a spin and that'll get the motor going. You can lubricate the bearings, but again you have to be super careful if you pull this shaft part out that you mark anything on the bottom relative to this shaft. Often there's grub screws, you can get this little brass piece off and slide it out. Pull this whole, like the rotary magnet assembly out of the base of this drum assembly. But you do need to mark everything very carefully in a way that it won't rub off or anything. Sometimes you've got to scratch it into the metal a little bit or put a little mark in the middle, because if you get anything out of whack, you'll have all your heads switching at the wrong positions and stuff, because there's various sensors, and the motor has to be synchronized to the position of the heads. Because basically there's two heads that read across. This is actually like a 6-head machine, of course, but being hi-fi stereo and long play, but in your basic video there's two heads that read the main signal, and still the same in these things. And they've got to, as they arc across the tape, they've got to get to the end of the arc that they're reading basically on the tape and be switched to the other head. That also is all sort of synchronized in with sync pulses on the television, and when the what do you call it, when the TV signal, when it blanks, I guess it's a blanking period, isn't it? Just the vertical blanking, so you scan a whole, because it's interlaced, you do half a picture basically, and then you blank so the vertical scans a line from the top of the screen to the bottom, along with the horizontal going side to side of course, and then basically the CRT electron beam is turned off, so it's just black, so you don't see any sort of signal from it, anything on the phosphors, and that has to go back to the top of the screen. Then it scans another half a frame, and basically so they do 2 interlaced frames to like double the frame rate, so you, even though it's 25 frames a second, you're seeing the equivalent of 50 interlaced things, so you don't get any flicker. And yeah, that's, which is basically the idea of the interlacing. I think it's just to get rid of flicker. If you've got 25 frames a second, you get literally the flick switches, because it's something like the rate at which film, the old physical film format used to run at. And that's why they used to call it the flicks, because it flickered on the screen. So they double that up. So all this has to be synced in properly. It could be some issue with the signal coming from this isn't syncing in, but it seems when the machine puts its own little override signal in there, I forget exactly, I've got to remember some of the theory of this, how exactly they did it, but when you go into fast forward and pause and all that sort of thing, they've got to do things a little bit differently, I think. So we'll have a look at the image it produces. As soon as we go to vision search, we haven't got any colour there. I'll just add a little bit flick up for a second. Put into pause, got most of the picture there. Don't know if tracking has any effect in that, I don't think it will in pause. Still advance. And then we go back to like looking like dirty heads, and we've got some sync issues by the look at it. At least it's running okay on that. The back tension's not too bad. Still a bit on the high side for sure, which probably is causing some of that line issue. I think is more the back tension. Yeah, you can hear that noise, so I'm going to have to fix that back tension issue, let that off, because that doesn't do anything any good. So have a look at the underside. I suspect our servo stuff is in there. You see there's nothing, basically nothing except the little static strap on the bottom side of the drum motor in this one. We do have to remove this front panel, which you can just unclip those bits. Take out these red screws on top. Not many VCRs you'd work on with the front on them, because you can't get to the mechanical stuff or the electronic stuff. Place that, and we've got a plug here, so put that somewhere safe. Oh, we've got one of these things starting to come off, so that's not a good sign. It's been broken at some stage. Could have been broken in transit even. You've got to be very careful transporting these things, because those front panels are very fragile, easy to snap off. Let's put a screw back in now. Head amp too. Take the red screws out of this board. Already took a couple out. And yeah, that's a lot of stuff. So I think maybe that board's even the servo stuff. Should be able to unclip that board, so we've got plenty of stuff in here. That's all colour processing, I think, on that flip up board. I can see a couple of heatsink chips over here would be running motors and stuff. The main microprocessor is a motor drive chip for the loading motor or something. I do seem to remember something about possibly issues with when you've got a chip like that. That's your like driving your capstan or something motor potentially, or head or something, and these little capacitors around them, because it's quite hot in there, especially with all these boards packed in like that, that can be the sort of thing causes these sort of issues. But I definitely seem to remember some issues around that chip. And in these sort of areas you've got hot resistors and bits and pieces, so an ESR meter may well find an issue here somewhere. It's quite probable. It's one thing that National or Matsushita capacitors weren't always the greatest, but pretty reliable considering. But these machines are getting so old now. I mean, what year this actually came out? Probably around 85, 86, something like that, maybe 84. Don't know if it'd be that early because they had pretty old machines around. But they did advance very quickly, surprisingly, these machines. When you look back and see how quickly they went from the large early machines to the thinner, slimmer ones, it didn't take them very long at all. And then right down to the very cheap basic machines. Now, I think this is pre-Korea, who came out around 87, 88, which is when the quality of these machines started going down to match the Korean stuff, which were obviously a lot cheaper. And yeah, and it's not one of the real early big clunking machines. But yeah, I wouldn't mind betting that a good ESR check around that area may well find our issue. Okay, just having a quick look at this video again. I've checked a few of the caps around here and they all seem to measure reasonable, a couple maybe a little high, but I'll have to check the values on those. But I did notice on this chip, and somewhere else down here, that connector I think with test/color written on it, there's quite a few joints that look rather dry, and after I've been messing around swinging this board up and opening up this other one under here, don't think they're dry before, but a couple of these capacitors I looked at have actually got, you know, proper dry joints have actually broken on it. So I don't know if I'm pretty sure I never touched anything in there. I was just looking at them and then measuring this side. So I don't know what happened there, but maybe the wires pushed on them. So I think I'll start by just going over and resoldering a lot of these joints around here. But the caps themselves around that chip there and across to this other one, which are both run pretty hot, all seem to measure pretty good so far, without actually checking individual values. There's only one that was a little high, but it is a small one, so it's probably a very low value. So I think I might just go over there and just make sure there are no actual dry joints there, and we can go from there. So I'll start with, where are they? Those ones there. Any joint that doesn't look 100% needs to be resoldered. Where's that other cap? Yeah, that's the one. CO2050 and C2078. I should have said C2050, not CO2050. Even that trim pot looks a little iffy, and you tend to find these chips, especially the end pins on them, will play up. Probably best just to resolder the whole thing in that case anyway. That one wasn't too good, still isn't too good. Oh no, maybe it's just a weird reflection. Is that me? Yeah, I think it's just a weird reflection, makes it look like the solder hasn't taken properly. Surprising these big modules seem to be alright. Let's just try one pin and see. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. A couple of those aren't quite perfect, but was it that one? Yeah, that test, whatever. I did check there is a connector in the other side of it by the look of it. Or maybe that goes to the test colour switch or something. Oh, that's actually labelling not the connector but the switch there, I guess. Because that's, oh look, even this, well, both these sockets here have quite bad connections to them. So this machine's definitely got a few solder joints starting to go in it. Also do that one as well since the rest are gone. And probably those two. That's the video out. At least one thing's good, but those audio out connectors very iffy. That one connection to the video out wasn't the best either. I think they're alright. See what this thing's like. It doesn't look perfect, but yeah, no, it's pretty good. Now this other IC needs doing. Oh god, even that inductor there looked absolutely fine, but it didn't act fine. Someone said something soldered here by the look of it. Yeah, of course there's a piece of solder there that just wants to join onto the next track. Yeah, these ones are certainly iffy. Well, at least my eyes are still up to the job, only just. Right, I guess I won't be able to do this forever. That connector is very iffy on one pin. Didn't want to take solder. Those, whatever they are, don't look the best. I mean, it seems the actual capacitors are more like to have dry joints on them than actually be faulty. So not much good if the ESR is fine if the thing's not even connected in the circuit properly. But I'm not sure these joints are bad enough to cause actual issues. Hard to tell, a lot of them, they look cracked, but that doesn't mean they're disconnected at all. Some of this could have gotten worse in the transit, in the post. Certainly gives it a good shake about. But you know, it's good in a way because at least we see that they need some work. What's this other chip iffy? That one seems to be well soldered. Except maybe that end. Oh no, that end is not the best. Oh no, that end isn't either. Can usually at least count on a couple of end pins not to be 100%. Let's just go over them for the moment. Yeah, that's probably the worst soldering I've seen in the National. They did get a few iffy joints in the past, I think, but it's starting to go. But the soldering's quite a bit worse than this one, but it all depends on the life they had. But of course, it's a lot more years have passed by too. Problem is, I could waste my time on this and not get the machine running eventually, but at least I'm not going to be chasing these. But if I keep moving these boards around, who knows, I might create more if these are starting to go. So that'll be interesting to actually see. I'll probably move it around on purpose because we don't want to send it back through the post and find out it arrives home with more dry joints. Okay, I think that's covered that board. Probably won't make the slightest difference, but at least it might prevent further things failing as we're working. Yeah, why doesn't that board want to go back in? Just got to get around these little plastic pins sticking up. Push it to one side a bit, but that certainly does flex the board around a bit. But I don't hold any hope of our fault being fixed or anything. But at least that's out off my mind. Always supposed to do a visual inspection for that sort of thing because you never know. We're on. No, it looks somewhat similar, maybe not exactly the same, but yeah, I think it's about the same. I think I adjusted the tracking to one side, didn't I? Yeah, that's it. I know some of these nationals used to get blown fusible resistors and stuff, which could cause some weird issues. Someone's been in here and changed into at least one capacitor. I think we should probably check the power supply just again, so that's off the list of things to worry about, just in case this is a wider issue. I think, do we have screws from below these things? There are screws from above. Thinking of the newer machines. So used to Nationals having a little metal can with a switch mode in it. So we've got another one there. Get that plastic out of the way. Oh, now we can actually see some stuff. And I think there might be more screws. No, they're definitely loose. I think that heatsink might be a good idea to loosen off. There we go, something's happening, sort of. Power cord does not help. There we go. This is actually a regulator on the, I think that slots right out, doesn't it? Yeah. On the drum assembly. Is that a bit dry? Oh yeah. Very dry. So this thing's definitely got a bit of an issue with dry joints in it. I think they put that there just to heat the drum up and get rid of any condensation or anything. So-called dew. Because they have a dew light usually on these things. If you take them from a, I always forget, it's from a cold car or something into a warm building, that big lump of aluminium there stays really cold. Well, certainly relative to the building. And yeah, moisture out of the nice warm air will tend to condense on it. Not multimeter, I want SR meter. Now these ones should all measure nice and low. There are a few other dry joints in here that definitely could do with going over. 0.05, that sounds pretty good to me. 0.04, Probably should check these for voltage just in case, but 0.12, it's probably a little higher, but let's see what value that one, that's the one that's been replaced. But if it's been replaced, it's probably a sign it's one that's known to fail. So let's put a axial electrode, there's another little one here. That one might just check for, there's often one little high voltage one in here for the tuner or something that stays charged in some of these things. No, that's fine. .4, so that one 0.1, it's hardly measuring high, but let's, sometimes you get fooled by these things. That's 1000 at 25. It is measuring a little high. So it could be worth tacking another one over there just to see if it makes any difference. Not really much, but sometimes it can be enough, or at least an indication that something's not happy. And I see that really bad joint right there. So someone's resoldered half of this, but who knows how long ago that was. Normally, yeah, when they changed the cap, they probably went over anything that looked iffy at the time. But that was a long time ago, probably. But while I'm here, might as well go over the joints, even though it's not likely to make any difference now. It will make a difference in the future. Assuming this thing has a future. Don't think we've got a head fault or anything, but you never know for sure. We'll go over these last few, I guess. Not even sure what they are. Probably just wire links or something by the look of it. Don't know, would it have that many wire links? Who knows? Okay, having a quick look at this video again, and haven't had a look at the capacitors and dry joints and stuff and given it a basic check over. I started wondering if it wasn't actually the video heads in this thing. I'm trying to remember, I think I've had this issue. Normally if you can sort of get a clearer picture when you go to fast forward or whatever, it means the heads are still okay. Because if you've got a bad head, one or both of them worn out, you won't get a better picture doing that. But I've actually hooked it up to, I think this test point 1 is the correct point. I've checked a couple of these other points on here, don't seem to have much on them. Or they're DC test points or something, because you can get a, basically it's like an FM type waveform coming out of the heads. And it's a combination of both heads, sort of one after the other. And that's a good place to actually check if you've got a decent head signal coming out of the thing. And this is not looking too good, it seems to be right down on one head. And basically that waveform here, you've got this kind of fairly blurry looking signal at the moment. That's one head basically. You should have like a bit of a waveform there, then you've got another head, then it switches to the other head and just continuously does that. And the fact we've got one head really low here is not a good sign. Possibly the fact we've got a big peak on here means that the tape guides are out as well. You normally try and get it where these two things join, two waveforms. Often there'll be a slight difference between them. You can usually tell where they switch, but you don't want too much of a like a roll off or a great big peak. That's one of the ways you normally set to get your sort of tape compatibility compatible with all tapes and the like without any lines on it or anything. But yeah, that's not looking real promising for the actual heads being out, so I might have to check around the head drum there and see if I can do a bit more testing. I don't think I can really get a clearer signal on this oscilloscope, but I can just stretch it out or bring it in, and there we have it. Like basically that's, you know, one head, the other head, the same head again, and as they rotate around and read the FM type envelope off the tape. But that's definitely not looking too promising when it's like that. Usually if one head's out, and it can also be something with the lower drum, if there's a coil in that out, you'll usually, I think, you get a complete dead line there when that happens. It's very rare you get it, but occasionally the coils go open circuit. But yeah, that's not real good, but it is a common test point. It's usually what they call, I think they call it the head switching point or something, setting the head switching or something like that. I haven't actually got a manual for this thing. I might even have to get one just to refresh myself a bit. But look at that, that's not very promising. Basically both parts of this should be very close. If there's a bit of amplitude difference, doesn't matter too much. But when one side's almost completely gone, that probably means the heads are out. I wonder what happens if we go to the, yeah, we get a completely different signal by the look at it if we go to the fast forward or vision search. Right, on the TV mode, I think that's part of the problem. Oh, here we go. What on earth is going on there? If that is the correct signal, yeah, see, then it comes back to that. That's what I noticed, you get a second of this good signal. But I get a funny feeling there's something to do with these 6-head machines. They may use the other 2 heads or something, and then it drops off again. So there's something weird going on there. But I'm going to have to do a little bit more work to see if I can prove whether these heads are any good. Yeah, then we have a sort of nice strong signal, and then it drops off altogether. But often that sort of symptom is heads, but the fact it comes good when you go into the vision search is a little odd. But the more I think about it, the more I think I have seen this with faulty primary heads. That's something to do with when they switch to the other mode, but it may still be some other thing is affecting the synchronization of the switching or something, and that's what's causing that head to drop out or something. But I don't think that's the thing, but we'll have a look. I'm not sure if we can measure the signal coming off the heads themselves before the head preamp. I think it's very low, so I'm not sure there's much chance to actually check that. The other option might be, I think I've got a 200 series, NV200 series video here, and chances are you could actually plonk these heads into that if I can get that one running, and just connect up the, because it'll have basically the heads in the same position for the main video heads. It just doesn't have any connections for the long play or hi-fi heads. Assuming this is an actual 6-head, yeah, it is a 6-head because I know I've seen it on the heads. There's definitely 6 connections, so you can often just swap the upper drum assembly across, just solder onto the only 2 connections it'll have, and that'll probably do the job. I've got a long play JVC video here somewhere that had worn out heads that was given to me, and it's got a JVC hi-fi VCR heads in it, and I still never got around to even using it for anything. But I thought I had a second-hand hi-fi video and never had any use for the heads, so I just pulled them out of that before it went in the scrap metal and put it in this long play thing, so I at least got that going, and it just has 2 sets of heads that aren't connected to anything, and no connections in the machine to connect them to anything. So but it's physically otherwise identical. So that is something you can do with these. So I might see if we can do a substitution to prove it 100%, but we'll see how we go with that. Well, this is a signal off the same sort of test point in the NV280, which looks like it probably just needs a belt kit. I can't really get it to sync with the camera properly. I can't really get it to sync the oscilloscope properly for that matter. I don't know why it's refusing when I go to the TV mode like I did with the other one. It doesn't lock. But there's definitely 2 heads there, nice and strong. Quite hard to tell, well, it's not that hard to tell I guess, but tell them apart. There's not a lot of difference, but there is some sort of flat bit between them, so maybe there's a little bit out, or I don't know what this recording is that I'm actually watching. So it's finally synced. It's actually still on the oscilloscope now, but the camera's still not picking it up. But unfortunately it looks like the heads in this thing are completely different as to where their connection points are. So there won't be any substituting of heads by the look of it. The other thing I was going to check is whether any of these other simple machines have the same lower drum in it, because this other one's got quite a noisy, or did briefly have a noisy lower drum. Now obviously all the magnet assembly is not going to be the same, but if the bearings are the same, you might be able to change the bearings over. It's probably the only part that is compatible, because the rotary magnet assembly, the rotating part, the electronic connections in the stationary part are all going to be different. But it's got the same, it is a very similar unit, it's got the same transistor mounted on one end. The head connections and head preamp and stuff looks completely different in this machine. This is an NV870, and it is actually playing alright despite the idler being nearly knackered, and it did stop a couple of times. Get rid of the oscilloscope. Yeah, we're looking at the heads in this very similar setup, except that the head connections, these ones with the arrows on them, are basically 180 degrees out on this one, and on the other machine they're sort of in a group of 3 on each side. Now the one thing I can't remember exactly with these is a normal standard play machine with no long play or hi-fi on it should only have 2 heads. But I think these Nationals, the reason this has got 4 heads, even though I don't think this is definitely not a hi-fi machine, and I don't think it's a long play machine either, because I can't see any sign of long play on it. And I get a feeling the long play heads, so these, where these 2 holes are, was probably more of a 3-head machine by the look of it. And you've got these little green bits down there which are an adjustment where they screw the head on, and I think they tilt it or something, set it in the factory to get it lined up. So yeah, there might have been a 3-head, but I think the 3rd head or whatever it is, yeah, because that, is that connected to anything? I don't think it is. I think they've just put a connection there maybe to balance it or something, so it's, you know, there's nothing there. So they're a 3-head machine, that was it. And I think it's something to do with making either the vision search or the pause still type mode better. But I can't for the life of me actually remember what it was now. And I can't find any manual or anything online for this sort of series of video. Okay, so I've just unsoldered these heads. You've got to make sure, flick every single one of these pins to make sure it is actually come loose. Or when you're going to pull the head up, you're likely to break something because it's still soldered to the upper drum. And we don't want to do anything like that. So always make sure they're all free. I'll use a head pulling tool. Sometimes you can just wobble them off by hand. Sometimes you gotta, if you heat them up with a hairdryer, the aluminium expands quicker than the brass centerpiece and they'll come off. Still go carefully here. Make sure it looks like just the head is lifting and not the other parts. Oops, going the wrong way now. And there we have it. So I'm going to do a continuity test of everything that's the underside of the heads. So there's basically 4 head assemblies. These 2 just have 2 connections to them. These ones have 4 connections to them. They're like a double. You can see the little split in there. These just have 1 bit of brass, 1 bit of ferrite and stuff. These ones are split ones. Like I say, I forget exactly what Panasonic's idea with that was. Might have a good inspection. Make sure nothing looks broken. You can sometimes see the tips have been snapped off or partially snapped off or something like that. You won't tell if they're worn or not, but, and just make sure there's nothing wrapped around them or anything weird. That one's got a little bit of something hanging off it, I think. Hopefully not copper wire. Is it a bit of cotton or something? A bit of hair. Don't think that'd be enough to cause any issues, but anyway, because you've got a like coils rotary transformer under there, you can't measure really anything with the heads on the machine. I think I did used to have a video head tester at some point. Someone did make a video head tester, but I don't think I ever really used it, so I don't know what happened with that in the end. But I can't remember whether that would work on the machine or off. But 1 ohm, I need to just coils the wire, so they should measure very low resistance. That's 1.4. Interestingly, it's a bit different, but whether that matters. 1 ohm, 1 ohm, yeah, 1.4. So a couple of them are slightly different. It's probably those, what have we got? That's the other heads. Yeah, they're the 1.4, the single heads. So that one, yeah. And the double heads are each 1 ohm. Because there's no point changing the heads if it's not actually the heads that are faulty. Normally that sort of fault will just be the heads, but then we'll measure across these pairs of pins that the heads connect to. Problem is I like to move around a lot, so it makes it a bit more difficult. No guarantee, but generally they'll either be good or open circuit. Yeah, I checked that one too, didn't I? And if they're not open circuit, they're probably fine. Don't think I've ever seen a head drum with anything other than open circuit. They generally don't fail other than the bearings get noisy or stiff in them, or one of the coils goes open circuit. They all seem to be the same. That one was slightly higher resistance, I think, was it? Don't know if that's a bad sign or not, but maybe again we've got a slightly different transformer on some of them. .4, oh, so one of the end ones, wasn't it? So we do seem to have one ever so slightly higher. I don't think that's an issue though. Oh, that one's 0.05, so it's just the multimeter's probably sitting right on the edge. Yeah, no, that's all good. But that's only one half of the rotary transformer. That's the upper half. So the next problem is we need to get access under here to the lower half. Or maybe we can just use the plugs at the other end. Some of those wires go off probably to the hi-fi board, I'm guessing. I'm not even sure what the hi-fi board is or which one it is, but there would be something to do hi-fi decoding, and those heads wouldn't have anything to do with the video playback side of things and the head preamp. I don't know if I have to undo this screw or not to get this metal cover off. It's been so long since I've done one, I honestly can't remember. No, I think it's just meant to, well, it does help it slide off anyway. Yeah, it's certainly one I'm going to slide off with that there. How does this come off? Feels a bit like it should just pop up or something, but that bit should lift, I think. Yeah, it's starting to come. Here we go. Just been a bit difficult. So here's a great big connector. We really need to disconnect these heads from whatever they go to. I guess it's possible we could have dry joints or something down in here. Probably unlikely, but not impossible. So that's the one that here goes off on its own. So that would, I'd say, definitely be the hi-fi heads. Now I've got no idea what connects to what here, but we should have a bunch of coils. Do those connectors give us any indication? We've got ground and, where's it, ground? Black and 3 others. And these have black, black and 6 others, makes sense. I would assume they are pairs of heads, maybe pairs of. No, wait, we've got 12 there. We've got how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. No, so all of them must be connected to something. Nothing. 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 That ain't a good sign. 1.4 there. 2.9 there. So maybe that is some sort of just ground connection. I don't know what they actually do on this side, whether they join some of them together. So interesting that grounds don't seem to be connected to, so they are just pairs in these other cables, but I look at probably with a common somewhere. Uh-oh. Not sure that one should be open circuit. Not that I know really what I'm doing here, but see that one's connected to that one, and probably connected to that one via a higher resistance. Then they're probably not connected to the other half, no. That one's connected to that one. Yeah, that one's not connected to that one. That's connected to that. Oh dear. That's not a good sign. This drum, or maybe that's why this drum's noisy. Maybe we've got one of these collapsed rotary transformers or something. But that is definitely not promising. So maybe this lower drum is even worse than expected. Take that little static thing off, and should be just 3 screws, yep. But obviously when you undo the last one, don't go completely undoing it because this thing's going to drop out. So get your hand underneath it ready to catch it. We all just, oh no, we're not all disconnected. I was thinking we were, but of course we're not because we've still got the motor plugged in. No, I didn't plan that too well. Well, we're probably going to have to pull this apart to check it anyway. And obviously you've got to wipe all your fingerprints off this afterwards because it will eat into the aluminium. I don't think I've ever pulled one of this type of Panasonic apart before, so this could be interesting. Now, one of the things you've got to be super careful about with these is, I think even this cover I should be marking it, because everything has to go back the way it was, or maybe not everything, but things are position sensitive because there's usually magnets and stuff, and they're related to the head switching, all sorts of things like that. This is probably the important bit. Yeah, we've got to mark, at least it's got a screw there. I might even just put a slight scratch in this because the problem is with putting a marker pen on there is it often comes off again. Let's see if I can just make a slight, don't think the screwdriver's hard enough because this piece is not really used for much. Just carefully, yeah, let's just polish the tarnishy stuff off there because we've got to get this piece, these two bits back together. I'll put a pen mark there as well. I've just basically scraped the grease off, I think, off where they have a little bit of grease, or is it just where the static strap little pin thing sits. So where are my small Allen keys? It's something like that one, I think. It should be pretty tight. I don't know the height matters, but it was basically flush with that middle bit. There should be a mark where this Allen key set anyway, just to quite a strong magnet in there to show you where it's at. Hasn't made a lot of a mark, but there is sort of something there. I might even extend my mark down there just a little bit. The problem is we've got to slide a lot more off here, I think, like this motor assembly. I'm not sure this shaft, I don't think it comes loose yet, because we've really got to lift this rotary part here up. Yeah, that sounds bad. I suspect we might have a faulty coil assembly or something in this thing. I'm not sure if it can be repaired or anything, but I mean, I might be wrong. Maybe there's nothing wrong with this thing. Maybe that's meant to be open circuit because they didn't connect it for some reason, but I don't think so. Is there another little piece we've got to get out from under here? Nope. I think we're going to take this piece here off. Just a cover, I think. Oh, it's actually got the other board mounted to it, doesn't it? Oh, it does too. So better be super careful because we've got a ribbon type connector there. And that could be where the faulty lies as well, as that ribbon cable possibly. They don't really get moved once they're assembled, so you wouldn't think so, but it's possible. Of course it's stuck on there, isn't it? You've got to be super careful not to pull on anything like that. I think we're going to take these other two screws off, then the motor should come off. I think they're all fairly similar, these things, but like I say, I'm not sure if I've ever pulled this series apart before. Not a magnetic screw, that one. I think it's made out of brass or something. Brass with a copper washer, possibly. Now, but I might just mark this so I definitely know which screw hole goes where, because sometimes they aren't that obvious. I think it's probably going to be obvious, but I don't know. Not the way all the connectors go the same direction, I guess, is about it. Now I have to take this piece off. This actually is probably going to matter too. Well, it faces the same way as our other mark, so good on National for doing that. I'll just put a bit more mark there just to be sure, to remind me what's what. Even though hopefully, what's the time? Oh god, it is getting late. Should never start things like this late in the day, because you really want to put it back together while you remember how to. And it doesn't take that long. Yeah, that stayed on there thankfully. And we've got a couple of little bits that go under there, and this should, with hopefully without taking any markings off, should slide up. Yeah, thankfully. Oh god, look at the white stuff in here. What is going on here? Oh, it's actually been crunching into this bit or something. What on earth? Can't see any obvious issues yet, but that doesn't mean much. But what is that white stuff? I was expecting the bearings to be faulty, but it's got all this white stuff down in the lower. Looks like it's been rubbing against the plastic of this bit. Well, that's a new one. Can't see any obvious damage. Let's have a look in the magnifier. Oh, we've got corrosion, I think. Oh, we do. Oh no. I thought there was something slightly green. There's a ring of greenish stuff around, but it's in between the coils. But down here where the wires cross that, that's where you're going to have an issue. That one looks fine, that one looks fine, even though it's got, I think there's a ring of copper in there or something. This one looks fine, that one looks iffy, that one doesn't cross it, that one doesn't cross it. So even they have a little bit of something. the two most dodgy one, well that one goes under so you can't really see, that's under. Yeah, this one and that one looks very iffy. That one goes under and is a little green and brown. Now the question is, how do they then hook into this wiring harness somewhere, but I've got no idea where, because that goes in under the ball, under the ferrite bit, and it's basically jammed in between solid aluminium. But anyway, that sort of confirms what I thought. We've got an issue in this part. But what is that white build-up? That I have to know. Is that corrosion as well? Maybe that's what it is. Oh yeah, maybe. Oh, what a shame. Yeah, I think that's some sort of corrosion on the aluminium. I wonder if water's sat in this thing or something. Nah, surely not. Who knows? Ah, well, that's not a good sign, because we may well need a new lower drum for this thing. Yeah, it's sort of white stuff around the edges as well, so... Well, the water wouldn't sit in here because it just ran out that hole anyway, so that's not exactly what it was. That does look... I wonder if there was a bad glue in it or something, I don't know. But yeah, it is a pain when you get faults with this sort of thing, because these used to pretty much write the machine off if you couldn't find a second-hand one somewhere. It was generally not worth putting a new one in because of the cost of them. But you could easily diagnose that as a faulty set of heads, order a new upper drum, and waste your money on a new upper drum basically, because it ain't going to fix it. And of course, unfortunately, it's killed one of the important sets of heads. If it had just been the hi-fi or something, but then I guess not much point having a hi-fi machine if the hi-fi doesn't work, but it would have kept going as a playable machine. But at least if that comes off, we know it probably isn't damaged bearings. That is the crustiest crust I've seen in one of these. It's very weird, but the other problem is, even if I could patch that little wire up or something, how long is it going to last? If there's a continual corrosion issue, that little thing goes under a lot on those. These end ones don't look too bad because they're sort of out in the open a bit. So go over that and then under these other coils, so there could be damage anywhere really, but yeah, my bet would be this second one around, or third one around, because there's a little short one there. This fourth concentric ring out from the centre, or third in from the outside, that's the one that's... And even if that is an open circuit, I bet if I poke on that wire, it soon will work, because that wire is looking very dodgy. It's that second wire, very hard to see, but that little wire there, it's got some sort of muck on it. I'm guessing that's the one that's open. I don't even have anything small enough to touch it without... Does it move? I can't really tell. It doesn't look like it does. They're probably glued in place a bit with a bit of lacquer or something. It's got quite the growth on it though. Yeah, why is that little ring of whatever in there? It's just that one ring in particular. It looks like it would have been, well, possibly been another piece of copper wire. Why would they put a bit of copper in there though? If it's not connected to anything. And why has only one bit corroded? Maybe it's not copper at all. It looks, it's very green, so it's got to be copper, I think. What happens over there? Part of it almost disappears, I think. I think it's actually a piece of it almost missing there, or it's corroded right out, or maybe it's just in deeper. Damn. Yeah, potentially the only cure for this is a whole other machine. the other thing, I mean, of course it had to be the middle one, didn't it? The very middle one, pretty much. Well, I think that's the one. I can't even prove for sure which one. How do we test this? There must be a way of knowing from the upper drum, this bit, that's got the same, oh god, that's got the same bit as well, like a copper piece that's corroded. Oh yeah, there's green growth on that one. There's green growth on that one. This is looking worse by the minute, and more green growth over there. Which is it the same, the corresponding one to the other one, isn't it? Yeah, the fourth one. Just out of interest, so if that's the one, what head does it go to, I wonder? Goes to that head, but now we don't actually know. Oh yeah, there's the white. I was going to say, how do we actually know which way around the head went on this thing? So it's that one there, that's on the green side, on that end. Which, yeah, goes to this head here. Yeah, which is one of our main video heads, I think. So it's that head there is disconnected. Yeah, I don't really know what I can do to fix it. And looking at this other half, I'm not sure there's much point. You could probably scrub all this off and hope for the best. I'm just interested in what these bearing numbers have got on, because I wonder whether you can get these bearings. It's got R-15802Z or 80ZZ? 1560ZZ, sorry. I said 80, didn't I? And it's got NMB. Is that 696? 696ZZ. Don't know if that means anything to any people that know about bearing numbers. This one's probably the same, I would assume. 1560ZZ, yeah, R-NMB must probably Nippon something bearing. Yeah, 696ZZ. If you get that light on the right angle, you can read it easy as anything. I could read that with my eyes there. Oh yeah. Yep, so we've got a faulty lower drum. What a shame. Should I just put this back together for now? Or what I could do, I guess, is get some close-ups of that. Probably not on this camera. I might have to get some photos of it. And yeah, well, just out of interest, let's see if we can scrape this white stuff out of the other half and see what's actually going on here. It's actually kind of caked onto the, it's not hard though, particularly hard anyway, caked onto the, I don't know, is that yeah, it's ferrite. I think it's this. I think this is it ferrite? I think that's, yeah, a piece of ferrite. This whole piece. Well, it is a rotary transformer, so it's bound to have ferrite. That all came off nicely. Probably this will all run smoothly now and quietly. If I can get it back in there, I probably should actually put a bit of oil on there, but it's only a temporary thing at the moment. Yeah, still a bit noisy. I reckon those bearings might have inhaled a bit of that stuff. Oh, let's spin it from the other side. Yeah, I don't know if that's ideal. Sounds a little bit off, which is a shame. So yeah, I might even reassemble, like I say, well, I don't know how. We've got to put those bits back first. I might reassemble this roughly together. And I did look up the heads for these just out of interest. I didn't actually see if they're still for sale, but to see if there's any equivalent models. And it was only NV, what was it, 870, which this is, and 890, which I don't think I've ever seen. Probably a slight variant. There's not really much point even worrying about tightening things up so much. So no, there's not. If there's not equivalent heads, that means there's, well, really, unless you've got a hi-fi model, you're not going to get an equivalent lower drum, because it just won't have that many windings in it. The two-head machine mechanically probably has the same piece of aluminium, the same motor on it, but of course this connector and the ferrite bit and all that's going to be different. Okay, I'll put it all back together for now. I guess we should double check that it's still, you know, poking around might have made it come good, but I doubt it. So it was connection there. Could have made it worse for that matter too, I guess, but connection there, connection there, and yeah, mega ohms there. Which I forget which ones of these were connected to those, I think. And that one, I guess we don't really need to check, move across. Yeah. Don't think there's basically no point in lubricating that up or anything. I mean, I can soon pull it apart again if I need to, but I was thinking I'll probably have to end up pulling this thing to bits anyway. That's one of the reasons I thought I'll just double check the, because it almost looks like, I don't know if that date is when these heads were changed, but I suspect these heads have been changed. I think 0899 would mean these are replacement heads, so they're unlikely to have had so much use since then. You never know with people, but that was getting towards the end of life for VCRs really, so maybe people, you know, kept it going a few more years and retired it. Now maybe because of this issue, or this issue's just occurred, it's been put away in good condition, kept in poor environmental conditions, and the moisture's got to it and caused that issue. So I have to talk to the owner, I guess. About the only hope we really have with this is to try and find another one with some other issue, like physical damage, or who knows, some weird board fault or something that's written it off, or even just one if you could get it cheap enough, even if it just needs new belt kits or whatever. But I mean, this machine's kind of due for that type of thing anyway, a good overhaul kit and all the rest. I guess the other thing to see is if anyone's got a drum assembly for one of these. Don't think I ever had one of these machines for parts. I used to have a very extensive collection of VCRs for parts because I used to buy them not working to fix up again. Plus you get the odd occasional ones from customers that you couldn't fix, but a lot of the time I could fix them, because even if they had a part like this gone in them, I'd just offer them to a cheap price to put a second-hand part in to keep it going. Because, you know, no use paying $200-300 or something ridiculous what it probably used to cost for one of these, when a good second-hand one will probably get it going. A lot of the time when these machines were newer, you'd get the occasional one-off failures, so you'd know which parts commonly failed, which didn't. So if it wasn't a common part for failing, then it was worth putting a second-hand one in. A lot of the time, like a sharp capstan motor, you wouldn't put a second-hand one in because they failed all the time, but in certain models. But no, I don't think I ever had one of these Nationals. Probably had very few of this series of Nationals at all that you couldn't be fixed. I think I did have a couple of scrap 450s or 250s, but they were usually because they were damaged physically in some way or something like that, or water or lightning strike was another thing. Used to kill a few machines that would blow all sorts of parts and basically take more time to fix than it was worth a lot of the time. Or sometimes even with a second-hand machine, of course, if you had needed to put new heads in it or something, they could actually be enough of a cost that to put new ones in, it just still again wasn't worth it. If or capstan motor gone or something, if you could get a second-hand one, it was worth fixing. If you had to buy a new one, it wasn't. So you'd sort of stick it on your junk heap and hope that the right part would turn up for it one day. But yeah, these were a super reliable machine, so it's a real shame to see one with one of the major parts gone. This is probably the worst part that could fail in a VCR really, is the lower drum, other than having some really obscure electronic fault. But most electronic faults you could track down no problem, like I say, unless it's been blown up by lightning or something, which could, you know, take out the tuner and bits here and there and bits in the power supply and everything in between, random parts, and be not worth doing. But anyway, we'll see what the owner wants to do, I guess, and what we can do with this. Might just have to put it aside and wait for another one to show up that we can pinch the part out of, assuming it doesn't have the same part gone for the same reason. But we'll see how we go.